What red flags should I look out for when dating as a poly person? Um, so I think that I have a couple of answers here. For the most part, I don't think that the red flag, like the general red flags, are super different in a poly person than in a monogamous person. Like, is this a person who listens to you? Is this a person who respects your boundaries? Is this a person who cares about what makes you happy and without sacrificing or being beyond their own boundaries does those things? Jojo, it's okay. What are you doing, baby? What are you doing, baby? It's okay. Sorry, my dog having feelings. Is this a person who like respects your no? One of the things I tend to do early in dating is say no to something. That's a genuine no for me, but like to see how they take my no, to see how they roll with that. Are they someone who can take my no gracefully, or do they throw a huge fit about it, or try to like get me over that no? Is this someone who shares important values with me? I'm a trans queer person and I live in the South. And if you are someone who's okay with voting for people who want me to not exist, we can't date. That just doesn't work that way. Like, you can't say that you want to be with me and vote for people who want me to not exist. Like, that doesn't work for me, right? Is this someone who has like the life things that you need a person to have in order for a relationship to work well? I think the poly specific ones would be, you know, is this a person who has experience with polyamory, and how do you feel about being with people who don't have experience? For me, I don't tend to get into significant relationships with people who don't have a lot of polyamory experience, because I have pretty high expectations of the people who date me. And I have found that if someone is newer to polyamory, the likelihood that they will be able to meet those expectations is lower, because a lot of my expectations have to do with having unpacked a lot of those monogamy mindset things, having, you know, explored what it is to have a relationship that is not based in the relationship escalator model, that is not bound by the stories and the scripts that we get from monogamy. And so if someone is newer to polyamory, it's less likely that they've done their internal work of unpacking those things. And so it tends to be harder for me to have a successful relationship with someone who is newer to non-monogamy, not because I can't like communicate with them or can't like make it work, but because my job is teaching people how to do those things, and it can start to feel like work when I'm in a relationship with someone who is newer. Some people have red flags about like how someone's doing in terms of their finances, how someone's doing in terms of their employment. You know, there are a lot of red flags that are person specific. I think a big red flag that I notice in non-monogamy land is like, is this someone who isn't close with any of their exes? Like, is every ex of theirs someone who was a terrible, horrible person? Is every ex of theirs someone who they refuse to ever speak with again? The reason for me that this is a red flag is that if every single ex someone has is a terrible, horrible person who was awful at things, that's what you're going to be in the future. It's okay for people to have a variety of exes. I have a variety of exes. I have some exes I still chat with all the time. I have some exes who I'm close friends with. I have some exes who I never want to speak to again. But I think it's less about like, do you have any exes who you never want to speak to again, and more about, is it all of them? Because the likelihood that every single person you've ever dated was a terrible person is pretty low. And if it is true that they were all terrible people, that for me brings up questions about partner selection as well. Like, are you someone who seeks out people who are going to like hit some buttons that you have, or like that are helping you re-experience some trauma that you have from your past? I think other poly-specific red flags would be like what kind of polyamory do they do, and is that in alignment with you? I don't have relationships with people who are in closed situations because I don't want to be a part of a closed situation ever. I don't tend to get into relationships with people who do hierarchy because I am not into hierarchy. Like, that just does not work for me. I don't tend to get into relationships with people who like do a very like mandated kitchen table version of polyamory where like if you happen to not want to be close to a metamor, that's going to be a problem. I tend to prefer people who are like okay with whatever kind of happens with their metas, okay with what happens with other things. Another red flag, like, are they someone who develops relationships with their metamors, or do they not do that at all? And like, what does that mean for you? For me, I prefer people who have at least some interest in trying to get to know or develop a connection with their metamors. But again, that's a very person by person thing. And I think, again, like most of the red flags for relationships are the same, no matter what. I think we're all going to have like our own personal red flags. And then we're also going to have those more general ones of like, is this someone who can't respect a no? Is this someone who tries to push you past your boundaries? Is this someone who doesn't listen to what you want or tries to talk you out of what you want? Is this someone who handles conflict in a way that is aggressive and harmful rather than kind and caring? Or at least aims for kind and caring, right? Like, none of us are going to be perfect. Is this someone who can't admit their faults? Is this someone who is always the helpless victim in a situation? Is this someone who avoids a ton of conflict, right? Like, there's just a lot of things that are very person by person. And so I think it is, I think, like, look for those general red flags and also sit down with yourself and figure out for you, what are your specific red flags? What are your specific green flags? I think a lot of us want to focus on red flags because we're like, what are the things I will not tolerate? And that's good, it's fine, but I think it's actually more important to look at like what we do want in people. Like, how do you want someone to handle conflict? How do you want someone to show that they're listening to what you say? How do you want someone to show that they respect you? Like, what are the ways that someone can actually behave in a like positive manner? So like things that they actually do rather than things they don't do that show you that they are a good match for you. Because someone who doesn't yell at you leaves a whole lot of other ways that they could be doing things that don't fit for you. So I think it's important to also kind of like look at it from the opposite direction of not just what are our red flags, but what are our green flags? What do you want? What do you actually want to move towards? Knowing what you don't want is important and it's helpful, but it's not the whole picture.